This video is for 79 for purple group. This is for your homework check. So once you have finished all of your homework parts, you go ahead and watch the video and I'll give you some of the answers, and if your answers match mine, that's great. If your answers don't match mine, then you need to go back and rework the problem. Remember, the point of it is not to just copy down the right answers and keep turning it in over and over. You need to show me that you know how to get to the right answer. So remember that it's not the answer that matters, it's the work that you show. So go ahead and we'll start with part 9 for lesson 79. So the first part of your homework that you did was part 9, and the instructions say for each item, answer the questions, and then box the answers. So we have to make sure that we read them very carefully. So it says that part 9, a rectangle has a base of 16 meters and a height of 19 meters. What is the perimeter of the rectangle? And what is the area of the rectangle? So we notice here that we have two different questions. We need to know the perimeter of the rectangle and the area of the rectangle. So you can't just skip to the end and look and answer one question. We need to answer both. So we know the first one is asking for the perimeter. So if I have a rectangle and I've got 16 and 19, I know that in order to find the perimeter, I need to know how far around the outside that it goes. So I need to know 16 plus 19 plus 16 plus 19. So when you're doing perimeter, you add up the lengths of the sides of the rectangle. So to do, for A, the first one they're asking for, the perimeter is 16 plus 16 plus 19 plus 19. And you should have 70 meters, because in the problem here, they told us that the units were meters. And since it's perimeter and not area, I don't need to do square meters. I will do that only for area. So the second question of A is asking for the area. And the area is the base times the height. All right, base times height for rectangle. So for base times height, which would be 16 times 19, the second part of problem A would be 304 square meters. This one I do have to have a square because I'm doing area. So for A, you should have 70 meters and 304 square meters. All right, for B, it says the field is in the shape of a rectangle that has the base of 380 feet and a height of 88 feet. So what is the area? So for B, they only want the area. So I don't have to do perimeter, but what I'm going to do is 380 times 88, because we know that for area, it's base times height. So even though they didn't draw us a picture of it, we know what the base is and what the height is, so I multiply those together. So 380 times 88 feet is, you ready? For B, the answer is 33,440 square feet. All right, don't forget your unit through 33,440 square feet. All right, check your answers. If you did not get it the way that I did, go back and redo the problems. Make sure that you have them set up correctly, and then come back for the next section. Okay, for part 10, they ask us to figure out the area of the triangle, and they give us a hint to ask us to start out with the equation for the area of the triangle. So, on your paper right now, you should have the equation for an area of the triangle already written out. So if we know that if we're looking for area of a triangle, I'm going to put that here to remind me it's triangle, it's base times height divided by 2. Because if I only had base times height, that would be the area of a rectangle. But since I'm doing the triangle, it has to be divided by 2. Remember why is when we're looking at our triangle here, we see that it is half of a rectangle, right? If I was to fill in the other half of this, I would have a rectangle. So to find out base times height, which would tell me the whole area of this part. But when I divide it by 2, it's just telling me the area of the original triangle, which is all they really were asking for. So first you figure out for the whole rectangle, and then you divide it by 2 just to ask for that half. So for A, they gave us 19 times 21 divided by 2. So when I'm trying to figure out what that equals, if I do 19 times 21, I get 399 divided by 2. And then I can't leave it like this. So once I do in my calculator 399 divided by 2, your final answer for A should be 199 and 1/2 square feet. So for A, for the area of the triangle, it is not 399. It is not 399 divided by 2. Once I do 399 divided by 2, I get 199 and 1/2 square feet. So what I'm going to do for B is I'm just going to write the number, and what you have to do is you have to show the work to show me how you got to the answer for B. If you just have the number that I write down written down on your paper with no work shown, we're not going to count it. Okay? So for B, the answer that you should get is 96 square miles. Oh, sorry, square meters. Just meters. So the answer you should have for B is 96 square meters. And if this answer doesn't match what you have, go back and rework it. Start with the formula and then just plug the numbers into the formula and work it until your answer matches mine. All right, so pause the video here if you need to rework it, and then we'll go on to the next section. Okay, so this one for part 11, they're giving us in, out, and end up number families. So that's the first thing you should look at on your paper right now, is that if you have a part-all problem, or you have a difference problem, or anything like that, that's what you need to go back and change right now. So once you have an in, out, end up problem set up, we have to solve for the value that's missing. So what I'm going to do is for part 11, I'm just going to write the answer to this question, and you have to come back and show me that you are able to set the problem up correctly. So if your answer matches my answer, I'll know that it is set up correctly. If you just write down my answer, I will not know whether you know whether to set it up or not. So you're going to have to make sure that you go back and rework the whole problem to show what you know. So for A, your answer should be 32. And it says left in the tire, so 32 is your end up number. For B, the answer you should have is $60. And that's an in number. All right, so 60 is your in number that you solved for, and 32 is your end up. So if you didn't have either of those numbers in your in, out, end up number family, pause the video and go back and rework them until you get the same answer. All right, if you have them complete and your answer matches, then you can go on to the next section. So for part 12, this is another one that I don't know if we need to go into a ton of explanation about. All they're telling you to do is work it in a column problem, which means that when you copy the problem, we have to put it as like an up and down addition problem. So if my first one is 3.56, and I need to add $12.08, I need to make sure that my decimal points are lined up. It's most important here that the decimal points are lined up, and then the rest of the problem is filled in. All right, because if that's lined up, then you'll know where to put each of the rest of your numbers. Right? We cannot put the 1 right under here because the 1 and the 3 have different place values. So if your numbers are lined up, or your decimal points are lined up so your place values are in the correct way, you should be good. So for 12, you should have $15.64. For B, you should have $12.41. And for C, you should have $27.95. So if these are not the numbers you got, pause the video, go back and redo the problems, and then come back for part 13. Okay, so for the next one, they want you to write this as a column problem again. The only difference is that this time it's fractions. So when I rewrite this here, how they asked, so I'm going to do 4/7 plus 1/2. So the first thing that I notice is that my bottom two numbers, my 7 and my 2, don't match, so I'm not yet ready to add. I also know that I cannot just multiply something by 7 and change it into a 2. I also know that there's nothing that I can multiply by 2 to change it to a 7. So what I'm going to have to do, because one won't change into the other, I'm going to have to change both of them into something that they have in common. So if I'm looking at my multiplication chart and I look down my 2's and I look down my 7's, the smallest number that they have in common is 14. So on my new fraction, I know that what they're both going to do is match 14. And if 7 times 2 equals 14, whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So that means that 4 times 2 is 8. So when I change 4/7, I now have my new fraction of 8/14. So looking at the bottom, I need to finish changing this fraction. And what I can see here is 2 times something is going to equal 14. So I know 2 times 7 will equal 14. And whatever I do to the bottom of this fraction, I have to do to the top. So now my bottom numbers match, and that means that my answer will have 14 as a bottom number. And I'm also ready then to add 8 plus 7 will be 15. So I have 15/14 for A. For B, you've got it a little bit easier because it's multiplication. So multiplication, you just do straight across the top, straight across the bottom. So for part 13, you should have, for B, you should have 90/4. Okay, for C, I'm going to give you the answer here is 7/20. If your answer doesn't match for C, go back and rework it. Make sure that you've changed your bottom numbers to match, and that if your bottom number changes, that your top numbers have been changed correctly as well. The same thing that we did over here when we had to change the top numbers the same way that we changed the bottom numbers. So pause the video, go back and check your problems, and then come back for the next section. Okay, the instructions for part 14 say to copy and complete each pair of equations. So for A, B, and C, I each have 2 equations. They're paired together. And I need to use it in order to figure out the first common number that they have. So the way to solve these is you're going to look at your multiplication chart, and I'm going to look down my 4's column, and I'm going to look down my 8's column, and I need to see that the smallest number that they have in common, that they both go into. So when I'm looking there, I know that the answer is 8, right? 4 goes into 8, 8 goes into 8. They both go into other numbers, right? They both go into 16, they both go into 32. But what we're looking for is the first common number, which means like the lowest number that they have in common. So in order to complete this, I have to look at 4 times what number equals 8. So we know that 4 times 2 equals 8. And we also know that 8 times 1 equals 8. So that's how you do the first one. That's the lowest number that they have in common. And I'm looking for B. I have to look through my 9s and my 6s on my multiplication chart, and the lowest number that they have in common is 18. There we go. And so then I know that 9 times 2 is 18, and 6 times 3 is 18. Okay, and the lowest number that 7 and 3 have in common is 21. So 7 times 3 is 21, and 3 times 7 is 21. So that's for part 14. Check your work, make any corrections if you need to, and then we'll move on to the next part. Okay, so for these equations that we have for part 15, we see that we have 4r is equal to 11, but I want to know what 1r is. So if I have 4r equals 11, and I need to get r by itself, right? I want r alone. I only want one of the r's. Instead of 4, I need to get r alone. And we know that when 4 is right up next against the r, that means that in between here that's hidden is a hidden multiplication. So really what it says is 4 times r. And in order to get the 4 to go away, we need to do the opposite. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So if I do 4 divided by 4, that means that then the 4 over the 4 will cancel out, and I'm left with just r, or the hidden number 1, so 1r. Now back up here, when I've divided this side of the equation by 4, if I do it to one side, I have to keep the equation balanced, and that means that I have to do it to the other side. So that means that for 1r, it would be 11/4. So that's what we have for A. 1r is equal to 11/4. For B, it's very similar. I have 7d is equal to 17. So in order to get the d alone, I have to divide this side by 7 and this side by 7. So that means that I now have 1, which is equal to 17/7. For C, if I want 15r equals 2, but I only need 1r, I'm going to divide each side by 15. And I've got r is equal to 2/15. All right, so that's all it is for part 15. Remember that when we have a number and a letter right next to each other, there's a hidden multiplication in there. And in order to get that number to go away, we need to undo it. We need to do the opposite and divide so that those two numbers will cross out and we're left with only 1. And whatever we do to this side, we have to do to this side. So then this becomes our answer, 2/15. So go ahead and make any corrections that you need to. Once you're done with the homework check, make sure to show it to a teacher. And then we will see where we're at.